So welcome, my name is Catherine Baldwin. I am a love, dating and relationships coach. I am the author of this book, How to Fall in Love, a 10-step journey to the heart. And I coach women and men on how to have a healthy and loving relationship with themselves so that they can have a healthy and loving relationship with another. Now, this topic of commitment, I believe it's my specialist subject. I could go on mastermind, I think, and I could answer questions about this. This is my specialist subject because of my own story, because of my own history, because of my own struggles with commitment. And I wrote it, but that's one of the reasons I wrote my book, because it was so important to for me to share what I had learned, with others around commitment. The book is one of the things that I have in which I share all my knowledge. I also run retreats. So I have How to Fall in Love retreats. I actually have one in Spain on May the 11th. That's next week, starting on a week Saturday. And I have one in Turkey in October. And I also run courses and workshops, and I actually have a How to Fall in Love course starting on Monday. So I'm going to tell you more about that a bit later once we've got into the detail of this webinar about understanding commitment. So I'm just going to take a look at my notes. So I've told you a little bit about me, but my relationship history, it was marred by my own difficulty with commitment, by my own struggles with commitment. So I wasn't able to commit. I kept falling for people who couldn't commit to me. I kept running away from the people who were able to commit to me, and I didn't understand what was going on. Now, if you struggle with that, we're going to try and understand why that is. Just to say, if you have any questions during this webinar, please write them in the comments box or send me a message separately. And if you would like to say hello or put a thumbs up at any point, just to let me know that you're listening, that would be great. So commitment, how does commitment show up in our romantic relationships? So it shows up in a number of ways. So we can, we can keep falling for people who aren't able to commit to us. And this is something that I did. I didn't understand where I was going wrong, but I kept dating people who were unavailable, emotionally unavailable because they weren't connected to their feelings, so they couldn't connect to me. Physically unavailable, perhaps because they lived a long way away on a different continent, unable to commit because of their own commitment issues. You know, in my earlier years, I dated people who were addicted to alcohol or to some other substance, addicted to work perhaps, so they didn't have any availability for me. They weren't able to commit to me. And then I also, and this might be your story too, when I came across people who were interested in me and who wanted to be with me, I ran away from them. I wasn't interested. I didn't find them attractive. I found them dull. I found them boring. Maybe I thought, why on earth do they want to be with me? And I didn't stay. And then when I was in relationships, I kept thinking that the grass was greener. I kept looking elsewhere. I kept looking over that person's shoulder to see if there was someone else. And in today's modern dating world, it's all too easy to go on a date and then look online when you get home to see if there's anyone else, to move on really quickly and to think that that isn't right for me. So that's really easy to do today. And I think it feeds our issues with commitment. So, yeah, those are the ways that commitment shows up in our relationships. So being drawn to commitment-phobes or running away from commitment ourselves. So how do we solve this? How do we understand it? So one of the main questions that we need to ask ourselves is, am I afraid? Because the interesting thing about the fact that we keep falling for unavailable people is that we are the common denominator in all of those relationships. So we are in all of them. The person that we're with changes, but we are the same. So yes, we might be drawn to people with issues of commitment. But the reason why we are drawn to them might be because we are afraid of commitment ourselves. Now, that was a real breakthrough moment for me when I understood that the reason I kept falling for these people was that I was afraid of commitment myself. So why might we be afraid of commitment? You will have your own story. For some of you, it will be obvious. For others, it won't be obvious at all. So I work with many women who have different backgrounds. Some of them have similar backgrounds to me, and it's really easy to fathom why they might be afraid of commitment. They might have suffered from heartbreak when they were very young. So in my case, my parents divorced when I was very young, and divorce happens all the time. And sometimes the children are absolutely fine. But what's important is that it is communicated to them that it's not their fault, that there's nothing wrong with them, that they're not unlovable. But I took on the message that it was my fault, that I was unlovable, that there was something wrong with me. And it was really painful to be abandoned, to be left. I also didn't have what psychologists call that secure base. So that nurturing and the strong sense of self, I didn't have that. And so I was very wobbly. I didn't have strong foundations, which is why I call my course Laying the Foundations. So I didn't have the strong foundations I needed to be able to withstand the difficulties. So I developed a fear of commitment because I learned that the man I loved, that big, tall man in my life, my dad, when he moved out, when he left, I understood that loving someone was really, really painful, that it really, really hurt. So why would I want to do that? Why would I want to put myself through that? But I was a child when I experienced this. I experienced this when I was very young. So I didn't make a conscious choice. I didn't consciously think that hurts too much, I'm not going to do that. Rather, I subconsciously made a decision that relationships are painful, that commitment leads to pain, leads to heartache, leads to hurt. I subconsciously made that choice. And then that mindset, that decision that I'd made in my mind, that affected all my subsequent relationships. So you might have an identifiable experience from your younger years, or maybe your teenage years, or even later, that taught you that committing was really painful. I also got the message that being in close relationships with people might be suffocating, might take away from me, might rob me of my freedom and my joy, that it might be too much, that relationships might be too much, that they would take rather than give. So I wonder if you took that message away from your early years. Now, some of you might not have an identifiable moment or experience that caused you to be afraid of commitment. You know, I do work with people who have what seems to have been a wonderful childhood and early adulthood. But if we keep falling for people who are afraid of commitment, or if we are always questioning our choices and we are never able to stay and focus on one person, then it might be that there is some deep, deep rooted fear of commitment. When we decide, we have to lose something. So Latin, the verb to decide comes from the Latin, and it means to cut off, to kill. So when we make one choice, we kill the other. And if we've had a lot of loss in our lives, if we're very afraid of choosing, then that choice is going to be really difficult. So we're going to want to keep looking around, to keep finding something else. So how might this show up? This might show up, this fear of commitment might show up, as I've said, in falling for people who can't commit to you, or in not being able to commit to others. So it might show up as you, always looking for something better, always looking for someone who is good enough. And a number of ex-boyfriends said to me, and I'm sad to report this because it is a painful memory. They said to me that they didn't think anyone would ever be good enough for me. I always found fault. I always found a reason not to be with that person. And I was focusing a lot on my thinking, on what I thought about them, not on my feeling, how I felt with them. So, and the thing about our ambivalence, the thing about the indecision, the thing about the fear of commitment is that the voices shout louder at us the closer we get to our dreams, the closer we get to commitment. So I was grateful to a friend for sharing something with me, her own experience, which really gelled with mine. So as she got closer to marrying her partner, those voices of he's not the right one shouted even louder. Her desire to find fault was stronger, and she kept finding fault with him. And as she got pregnant and was going to have a child with him, those voices shouted, and they were married by then, those voices shouted stronger again and louder, that there must be someone else and this isn't a good idea, and finding fault and finding fault. And the thing about fault finding is it creates distance with the other person. It creates distance in the relationship. And that is what our subconscious wants. Our subconscious wants to create distance with the person so we don't actually have to commit, and we don't actually have to go through that process of loving, because we're afraid of potentially losing, or we're afraid of making the wrong choice. So, that's the same for me. I am 2 months off my wedding. So I finally have my wedding ring, and there was a fair amount of indecision and ambivalence choosing that ring. And, recently I found myself finding fault with my partner, and it creates distance. It creates a wall between us. It breaks down the intimacy in a negative way. It breaks the intimacy. And, if I were to continue on that path, I would get what my fear wants, which is not to be in relationship, not to be connected to anyone, not to go through that deep, not to go into that deep, deep relationship with all the potential for hurt and loss and so forth. So I had to realize what I was doing, realize that my anxiety is really high right now because I am close to the biggest commitment of my life, I guess. We could say that when we bought the house together, that was a big commitment, a big financial commitment and an emotional one. But marriage is a big commitment. So those voices will shout louder for me. And if you are close to being in a relationship, if you are considering being in a relationship and you're afraid of commitment, the voices will shout louder for you too. You will feel like there's all manner of reasons why this isn't good enough, why this isn't right for you. Now, I don't know your situation. I don't know if the person you're with is right for you. I don't know if your doubts are warranted or not. But what's important is to ask the question. So there's a section in my book called Is This My Fear or Is This My Instinct? So is this my fear that's telling me to run away from this relationship? Is this my fear of commitment? Or is this my instinct? My instinct that this person isn't right for me? The right instinct? Is it this my good instinct, or is this my fear that's wrecking my chances of happiness? So the important thing is to ask the question, is to know that there's a possibility that your fear might be sabotaging your relationships. And then to do a fear audit, to do an audit of your fears, to get to know your past history. This is something that I do on my course, to understand your fears and where they come from. And how they might be sabotaging your life and other areas of your relationships. So to do a fear audit. But the work I do and the work I've done in my book and in my life and that I do on my courses is designed to help us to get to know the answer to that question. Is this my fear or is this my instinct? So that's about connecting to yourself, connecting to your truth, connecting to your intuition, trying to understand, knowing your patterns, knowing where they come from, and having awareness of how to change them. That is also so important to answer that question. And spending time with your feelings, spending time with your feelings. So many of us run away from our feelings, particularly the women I work with who tend to be high achieving professional women. We're good at doing, not so great at feeling. We're good at thinking, not so great at feeling. And despite 16 years of personal development and lots of work on myself and studying counseling and therapy and going through therapy, I still have a tendency to run away from my feelings and to not understand what's actually going on. So last weekend, did I really understand that it was my anxiety that was making me find fault? It took me a while. Fortunately, I got there. I got there reasonably quickly. I got there fast enough. I got there before I wrecked my relationship, before I pushed things too far, before I created the distance that my subconscious wants to create. So I got there in the end. But we need to know ourselves. We need to know ourselves. So this is an encouragement to you to go on that journey of self-discovery, or to deepen that if you're already doing it. To understand your fears, so to do your fear audit, and if you'd like to do that as part of a supportive group, please join my course that starts on Monday. There's a link at the top of this live and also in the comments section. And to understand your patterns and where they come from, and then to have support in changing those patterns, because they're not easy to change. So if you find yourself finding fault with the person you're with, or flitting between one person and another, which is so easy to do in this age of internet dating, swiping left, swiping right, before you even consider whether this person might be right for you. If you judge quickly, if you find fault, it could be that you're afraid of commitment and that you are always thinking that the grass is greener. So I have a section in my book where I mention how I managed to get to commitment. So, ambivalence and indecision has affected my entire life, around my career, around my relationships, around what holiday I should go on, what shoes I should buy, and so forth, what ring I should get as an engagement ring. But it especially shows up for many of us when the stakes are high, when the decisions are really big. So I wrote a piece for The Guardian this week on ambivalence about motherhood. The stakes are really high there in that decision. Do I want to try for children? Do I not want to be a mum? Those questions have followed me around for years. And also when it comes to being in love, being in a relationship, because that's such a huge commitment. So at 43, after being on and off with my partner for a number of years, mostly off, a few moments that we were on, I decided that we agreed that we would commit to each other, and I decided that I was going to do that 2 feet in, not 1 foot in, 1 foot out, which was my tendency. I used to have 1 foot in and 1 foot in the door. I decided to go 2 feet in. But of course, my mind was going crazy at the prospect of that commitment, at the fear. So I brought some support on board, and I agreed with a friend that I was going to commit to this relationship in my heart, in my mind, for 6 months. And that whenever I questioned or looked around and thought there must be somebody better or somebody different, or this isn't right for me, whenever I questioned and thought about that person I'd met online, whenever I thought about other people, that I would remind myself that I'd committed for 6 months. And that my friend would remind me that I had committed for 6 months. And as I brought my mind back, and it's a bit like when we do meditation, when our mind wanders, we gently bring it back to our breath, to the teacher's voice. When our mind wanders, we bring it back. So as in that early stages of that committed relationship, when my mind wandered, I brought it back. I brought it back to where I was, to focusing on that relationship. And 2 months went, 3 months went by, 6 months, and I'd done my 6 months, and by then I was committed, and I was in love. And then soon after that, we bought a house together, and then a week after I published my book in 2017, 18, 2017, my partner proposed and we're getting married in June. So I had to train my mind not to flit around. I had to train myself to be consistent and to stay, because otherwise my ambivalence would pull me in all different directions. So if you can relate to that, you might need to look at your fears, you might need to look at your patterns, and you might need some support and guidance in sticking to one path. So yeah, if you'd like some help with that, please get in touch. And remember to spend time with your feelings, So I'm going to wait to see if there are any questions right now. But as I wrap up, I'm just going to tell you about my course that starts this coming Monday, May the 6th. It's called How to Fall in Love, Laying the Foundations. And it is designed for anyone who struggles with these issues that we've been talking about. We're going to be a really small group of women, maximum 10, but probably more like 6. And if you'd like to join us, it would be wonderful to have you. There are lots of free previews available for you to watch about the course. So the link is above this video, and I'll put it also in the comments. It's designed for you if you're ready to invest in your romantic life, if you're tired of dating people who can't meet your needs, and if you're tired of feeling ambivalent and unsure and uncertain about the person you want to be with. It's designed to help you connect to your intuition and your truth, to change your patterns, to know your fears, and to let go. So I also have an article that I wrote for Psychology's magazine about the push-pull in relationships, and I'll copy that again in the comments below. And if you're interested in joining me on a retreat, I have one in Spain starting May the 11th at Cortico Romero, and I'll also put that in the comments, and one in Turkey in October. So yeah, if you'd like to download the first chapter of my book for free, you can go to howtofallinlove.co.uk. And again, I'll put that in the comments. So if there are any questions, please put them in the comments. If this is a personal topic you'd rather discuss one-to-one, email me, catherine@catherinebaldwin.com. And otherwise, I'm wishing you all the best on your journey of self-discovery and of a happy and healthy relationship. And my encouragement to you, and I guess my message to you, is to understand your issues with commitment and ambivalence, because otherwise they will sabotage your life, they will sabotage your relationships. You will keep looking and keep believing that there is somebody else, there is something else. And I am not suggesting that you accept less than you deserve or commit to someone who isn't right for you. But I am suggesting that you explore your fears and your issues around commitment, because you might be sabotaging your happiness. So thank you for watching, and I'll wrap up there, and you can feel free to get in touch with any comments. Thank you. Bye.